Hello, I'm Daniel Stevens. You might recognize my voice from the Hebrews videos and some other weekend editions. And I'm here to talk about a book of mine that's about to be published. By the time this video comes out, it will hopefully have already been out for a week or so. Before I get into that, first, I want to thank Professor Plummer for the opportunity to talk here about this book, and more generally for the chance to walk through the New Testament with you all in Greek. My book, which is about to be published, is Songs of the Sun, reading the Psalms with the author of Hebrews. What I do in this book is I go through each of the Psalms that Hebrews cites, and particularly the ones that he then refers to Jesus. There's one Psalm that doesn't get included there. There's an appendix about that. And what I do is I try to understand the way that Hebrews reads those Psalms and see what benefit we can get from reading the Psalm that way. In each chapter then, the format is we go to the Psalm first, we read through it, see the ways in which the psalm itself constructs its meaning, its themes, and its main emphases, but also the questions that arise from the reading of the psalm. From there, the book goes to Hebrews, sees how Hebrews cites and uses the psalm, what effect is used, what interpretation is made, and then I take the lens that Hebrews provides and take it back to the psalm and say, what happens if we read the entire psalm this way? So we expand on the one to a few verses that Hebrews cites and try to read the entire psalm in light of Hebrews' interpretation. What this hopefully accomplishes is a way of seeing Christ in the Old Testament, seeing Jesus in the Psalms in a way that is responsible, in a way that's sensitive to both how the Psalms themselves are written and to how Hebrews reads. The goal of the book is to help you have a better understanding of the Psalms, a better understanding of Hebrews, and also a better sense of how Christ is present in all of Scripture. Who is the book for? Well, in one sense, everyone. Go read it. I hope you enjoy it. More specifically, it's for anyone engaged in Christian understanding of the Scriptures, or anyone who hopes to understand how all of the Scriptures, both Old and New Testament, is Christian Scripture. This book is not a technical book. It is not a deep study of linguistic features, though of course it's informed by that. It's not set in Greek or in Hebrew, though of course, again, there's reference to that. But it is meant to be accessible to anyone who is engaged in Bible study, anyone who wants to understand the Bible a bit better. What I am going to do now is to give a little bit of a teaser of the content of this. I'm going to read some from the conclusion of the book and then tell you where you can find Songs of the Sun if you're interested. The reason why I'm reading from the conclusion is because each chapter individually looks at a psalm. It's focused on that one area and then how Hebrews uses it. In the background of that entire process, an implicit argument is being made. There's a way in which we can read the entire Scripture as Christian Scripture. And in part of the conclusion, I make that explicit. So here, in the conclusion, you get some of what's operating in the background of the entire rest of the book. So what I say there is, in the background of the individual studies of this book, I've been concerned with answering a question. How are we, as Christians, to read the Psalms? Or to put it another way, what does it mean to read the Psalms or the whole Old Testament as Christian Scripture? I hope that reading these Psalms with the Epistle to the Hebrews has made two things clear. First, we do not need to bracket Christ out of the Old Testament. Nor, second, must we formulate arbitrary rules each time we look for where Jesus might be in a given passage. It's easy to get the impression that Christological exegesis, the practice of seeing Christ in texts where he is not explicitly mentioned, is arbitrary. To be fair, some often do Christological exegesis arbitrarily. To see Christ in the Old Testament is not the same as reading the Romans Road into every Old Testament passage. It is rather to see Christ in his fullness, in his two natures, in his person, in his various acts of redemption and rule. The interpretation of the Psalms in Hebrews has revealed for us several principles for how to rightly see Christ in the Psalms. First, look for tensions in the Psalm itself. When Psalm 2 speaks of a human king called Messiah who determines the fate of nations, it is proper to ask, who is this? When Psalm 45 presents a human king on his wedding day who is called God with an eternal throne, it's appropriate to ask, who could this be? When Psalm 22 portrays a human who suffers unto death, is raised up by God, and whose deliverance brings salvation to all the families of the earth, it is right to ask, about whom does the prophet say this? Take the texts of the Psalms seriously and demand that they give answers. If, as prophetic texts, the Old Testament does not fully answer these questions, it is right to answer these Old Testament questions with New Testament insights. It is what God intends for us. It is what the whole Scripture is for. Second, read in light of the whole story of Jesus, the eternal Son of God, who assumed humanity, lived, suffered, died, rose again, ascended, and sat at the Father's right hand until his return. Some Old Testament passages will point to the whole story, like Psalm 8. Others will highlight certain aspects, like his death and resurrection in Psalm 22, or his exaltation and session in Psalm 110. All of Jesus' life is for us. All of Jesus' life provides the pattern for the Old Testament. There's more that I go on to say, but that is a small hint of the method being used or the underlying logic in how I think Hebrews reads the Psalms and how the Psalms should be read by us today. For information on the book itself, again, it is Songs of the Son, Reading the Psalms with the author of Hebrews. It's published by Crossway, should be out everywhere books are sold. You can go directly to the Crossway website, you can go to Amazon or wherever else you get your books. The publication date is February 25th, so by the time that this video comes out, it should well be published for about a week or so. So I hope that those of you who read this book find it encouraging, and I hope it helps you in your understanding of the Scriptures.